So today we are here with Ryan and Mikey, two colorists. Ryan is based in Chicago at Periscope and Mikey at Blacksmith in New York. And they are here to answer a lot of our questions about color in the post workflow, career, and all that sort of stuff, collaboration. Would you each take a moment to introduce yourselves, kind of how you got to where you are, what you're mostly doing these days?
Ryan, you
Sure.
start.
You want to start, Mikey, or me?
No, you do it, man.
Cool. My name is Ryan Stemple. I am the senior colorist at Periscope Post and Audio, Chicago. Let's see. How did I start off? I was a student at Columbia. Editorial track originally. Took a few color classes. Kind of got brought under the wing of one of the color professors who pushed me in the way of color after a few classes. Started off in advertising, went from advertising to network dailies, went from network dailies to where I am now, which is primarily, almost entirely, narrative content driven media. So feature films, short films, network television, both final color, delivery to DCPs, IMFs, DCDMs, final authoring for disc media, and also supervising the color correction and general looks path for network and feature film dailies.
Great. Thank you.
Hell yeah. I'm Mikey. Shit. Feels like forever ago now that I got into this, but I first started working at the mill, and I got into the mill through a good friend whose name is Randy McEntee, who's the head of 2D over there. But also, my sister went to school with Ian Berdevec, who is one of the owners of Light Iron. So kind of like early on, I didn't really know much of anything about post or what the industry was. So it was cool to sort of look at the early stages of Light Iron, and like Mike Cioni, who's also a good friend, was also one of the founders. Just kind of like seeing what those guys did, and then realizing like it was a career, a profession. Because if you don't know it exists, if you don't know being a colorist exists, you would never really think of it. And it's funny to talk to people now and to hear them say like, oh, well, we're much more conscious of of how films look or how commercials look. So it is cool to sort of bring light to that. Anyway, worked at the mill for 8 years, and then moved to New York about a little over a year ago to work at Blacksmith. Advertising primarily, commercials, have worked on a few features. But yeah, kind of done it all, really.
Great. So I thought maybe we'd start with a little bit of the kind of new to color kind of area, just because some of these people want to hear a little bit more about how to kind of work their way up the ladder and learn more about color on their own, as that's something that I've been asking you about, Mikey, a lot, and also spent like the last few years doing myself. So first question was, what are like a lot of mistakes that people make that you see in color, and what advice or tips would you give to avoid overcoloring? I'll direct that towards Ryan. We'll just start at the top.
The question of how to not overcolor, I think, is an important one, because I feel like that's the first thing that a lot of people do starting out, is they have frankly, a lot of power in how the final image looks. And they think, well, if I can do more is better. So often, I feel like the mistake that a lot of colorists take is the thinking that the more is more approach, when most often, at least from my experience in at least in narrative content, less is so much often more. You are not trying to break the wheel and reassemble it when you get an image in. it doesn't matter if it's log and you can go in an infinite number of directions after the color space transformation, or before it, actually. You are trying to be an ombudsman for the director of photography, the director, and the story. You are that final middle ground between the script and the viewer. And I feel like working smarter in terms of trying to usher forth the director of photography's vision, who has done a lot of work to make sure that the conditions are there, in camera, on the lights, on the day, in the blocking. You don't need to relight every single shot. Talk with your DP, and then try to think of it in terms of photography instead of something wholly yours. I think is a big mistake that the colors take in terms of like working more than they need to.
Yeah, I know dailies has been something that I've heard a lot of colors kind of praise as kind of building that idea, because you're really limited to those CDL controls a lot of the time.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, being a dailies colorist for 3 years and then now supervising network dailies on the color side of things has helped to shape my workflow, I would say. Like the amount that you can do with a LUT, lift, gamma, gain, that's color, really. It's lift, gamma, gain, and the transformation at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can hit it in the one light to about 70%, you've only got 30% left to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, no, dude, I fully agree. It's like, I think early on too, I was, it is fun and exciting. Like once you sit down, like I remember the first time, like I assisted Luke Morrison for 4 or 5 years. And then like, I remember like I worked with Mikey Rossiter, Greg Reese, like all those dudes in the mill, Josh and Ferg. And I remember like sitting down for the first time at the panel and just being like, oh, like I'm going to do this and this and this. And you're just like banging on LUTs and you're just making shit go crazy, which I think is a huge part of it too. Like I think oftentimes you need to push things and you need to see like how far you can really push something and break it and then like rebuild it, try and match it simpler. Like a big thing that Damo used to do was you'd create a look and then you'd have to do that. You'd have to save that and then do the same look, but you can only use 3 layers, or you'd have to use lift, gamma, gain, and curves. And then he would like take things away from you and you have to like match it as close as you could, which is crazy. And like, you realize how much control you have in just like in lift, gamma, gain. Like that is the core foundation of what color grading is. Cause like still at the end of the day, like digital, I mean, we're still trying to replicate the original film process and like color timing. So like that hasn't gone away. So I think like oftentimes like early on I got really caught up in that. And now I'm like, I fully agree with Ryan. It's like, dude, if I can keep it as simple as possible and work like that, if I can use a LUT and like maybe 2 or 3 nodes, like done, man.
When you look at these,
sorry, go on.
When you look at these programs, it's, as a student or something, it's really easy to kind of get caught up and realize how much power you have compared to what you're used to. But when you like look back at that kind of photochemical process, like the process,
it's the best.
So simple.
It's the best. And
people got amazing images then, so you really don't need to be pushing.
To what Ryan said too, like, so I mean, so much of it is driven by cinematography. Like the DP is crafting that image. We're just refining it. We're polishing it, because like you said, I'd say 70% of it's in camera. Like maybe the last 30% is you in the grand scheme of things. Because when I worked on TMAD, that feature I got into Sundance, it was like we did a whole first pass of just like trying to create this look and like, oh, it's shot in Nepal, so like we tried all sorts of stuff. And then we like sat on it for 2 days and went back to it, and we're like, man, this isn't working. And we went back and like literally just like created a quick LUT and then just used that for the rest of the film. So we used 1 LUT for the whole film and maybe a couple nodes, and it was like I think it turned out so much better in the long run.
That's the dream. Absolutely. I want to just really quickly. I know we have a lot of other questions.
Yeah,
but,
sorry that I dragged ass on that one.
No, absolutely. Because I just want to agree with you too on the idea of you, especially when you start off. But I think even now to this day, you kind of have to break the image first to know what the limitations of the image are, and then be like, okay, there's the end. Let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah,
Almost every time I do that, like I'll be like, how do I crank this up to the point to where like I can't do any more so that I know my limitations? I think that's important to know. I think it's also important to not be intimidated by, there are a lot of images of node trees out there. Like I'm sure everyone who wants to be a colorist out there who is like trying to break into the industry is following all of us on Instagram and seeing everybody's crazy node trees in our Instagram stories, right? When, at least in my experience, I have a standardized node tree that I use for every single grade, and it's like 24 nodes. That's only because I like to break out the things that I do. In that, like 24 node tree, I'm using maybe 3 nodes almost all the time.
Do you just have a bunch of nodes that are doing like really small like corrections? Yeah, because I mean that's how I was in Bayside too. I've switched to Resolve now that I'm a blacksmith, but sometimes my like layered tree or even now my nodes would be really big. But like, dude, if you bypass 15 nodes, they're all like taking green out, taking like it's so minor that you wouldn't notice it. And sometimes like I'll do that and then bypass all that shit, and then it's like I can then go back, add one node for like one master node, and then I just like match to that.
100%, man.
Because I think I think you're right, dude. It's about like it's what makes you more effective as a colorist, like what makes you more efficient in time or whatever you're doing. Like you got to find that groove.
Absolutely.
Cool. I think that definitely answers that question.
Yeah, sorry.
A lot more. I think you get some of the answers from that last question, but what do you guys think are the most important kind of facets to focus on to be a good colorist, and also to learn when you're just getting into it? And I guess I'll start with Mikey there.
I think you're right. It kind of, this echoes the first question, but to Ryan's point, I think learning the real fundamentals of color grading, because I mean, lift gamut game was all I would use at first. Like Luke was like very, very much about just using basic primary controls to get your image looking good. And then going back, once you've done that, to like maybe you add a LUT at the back end or something. But I remember like the first few things I did, like if there were music videos or I worked on a doc early on, I like buried myself hard because I was like trying to create this really like intense look, and then like to try and like match that, because like you need to make everything cohesive in the piece. And if you've got this like super complicated look and then you're trying to go and like apply that to things that to other shots that just don't work, you're killing yourself, and you're like, oh shit, here's a key, here's a shape, and you're just like, at the end of it, it's like, oh man, I burned so much time. So I think it is about just like we were just saying, like establishing something early on, and then just like finding your rhythm in that, in whatever piece it is. And every piece is going to be different too. You need to know that. You need to like be conscious of that too, because you need to approach everything, I think, with like the tools you have, but know that you need to be able to adapt to whatever the footage is. I don't know if that makes sense, but
I think it does. And I think that in terms of like, so the question is specifically like, what kind of things should you learn? Should you like get used to learning and knowing? Is that like what we're talking about primarily?
Yeah, and like what are the most important things to master per se early on? Gotcha.
Adaptability, I will agree 100%. Like being able to be malleable and going off on the cuff, and just also like learning how you don't have to be a tech guru at the software that you're in, or you don't need to be a quote unquote color scientist to be a good colorist. I think that's really important to say up front prior to what I'm about to say. But you can't ever stop learning new tricks, new workflows, frankly, new LUTs. If something out there is like, if someone's saying like, hey, this guy's like building this crazy LUT, you gotta at least look at it. Like, you might not like the way color space transformation LUTs they're aiming for, like film emulation, look. You gotta know what that LUT looks like and how it behaves with this camera, that camera, yada, yada, yada. And more to that point, you gotta start, I would say it's helpful. You don't have to, but it's super helpful to start to know the language of photography and know the language of DPs and what they're thinking about when they construct an image. That they're thinking about things like halation, that they're thinking about things like down the line into the mastering phase of things. They're thinking about things like gate weave, right? And knowing those things helps you not only craft a better image, but it helps you get inside their minds so that you can end up working smarter. You can end up doing the things automatically. Like eventually you get to the point where like your lift gamma gain is just like bloop, 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 bloop. 5 seconds you've got your contrast and you're going, and that's the scene. That's not immediate. You get there eventually. Same thing for things like for halation, gate weave, film emulation specifically too. Knowing, like, getting that feel for certain different film stocks when you want to emulate it. How much grain is too much grain? That is something that takes a long time to really learn the feel of. And part of that is just like trying to think like a DP.
I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Sam. Sorry.
I was going to transition to the next question, so all you.
No, I was going to say to Ryan's point, like doing all of that with the DP and thinking as a photographer helps you, or thinking as a DP helps create that relationship with the DP too, which ultimately is going to be a godsend for you, because if you guys are talking the same language and then you have this rhythm that's this back and forth, that really helps both of you, because then like maybe you guys can use each other to sort of bounce ideas off each other, and then that's where things really start to get creative. That's the part I really enjoy. I really enjoy that part of the process.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You got to be a people person in this career too.
Oh man. Massively.
So big.
So that was a good natural transition to kind of like the collaboration category. Like, how do you like to communicate best with people, and is there a language to color? I know you're talking about the language of photography and the language of like being on set, and so I know oftentimes that involves a little bit of kind of translation for the people in the room that you're working with, or maybe even not in the room, especially during these times. So I guess I don't even know who I asked the last question to, so whoever wants to answer that.
Ryan, you got that one.
Yeah, 100%. Learning the communication of the individual and the collective room is, I would say, at least like 50% of running a room, like if not more than that. Like, learning how to read a room is something that takes, I think, the very longest in this. If you want to be a colorist, like, one of the best things you can do for yourself is to either be an assistant or an intern, where you can sit in on a client session and learn how the colorist runs a room. Learn how they adapt to the energy of the room. Learn how they start using language they normally would not use to describe certain images. There are some directors and producers and DPs out there that will use words like, I just want this to look like flirty. You know, I want this to look like steel. Well, what do those mean?
Smoky.
Yeah, like I don't necessarily know, like, flirty to me, I think like, oh, you want this to be airy and sort of like a little bit like magenta, like a nice little glow. Well, maybe that's not flirty to that DP or that director. Maybe it's like deep and inky and red and kind of sultry, right? You got to learn that ebb and flow. And more importantly than that, though, you need to learn the energy level of the room. If you got like a demure DP, like, it helps to be a little bit more restrained. if you have someone who is like really excited, like, oh, hell yeah, that's awesome, man. Like you gotta kind of like match that energy a little bit, or do a counterbalance type thing. It's an ebb and flow.
Dude, yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's the room is, the thing is too, like I mean most of my work is advertising, and I think people, like, it's hard to talk color. Yeah, it's not a really easy thing, because I think color has become so commercialized now, like films especially. So many references are just like films. So like sometimes you're doing a spot and you get a bunch of film references that really don't match the footage you have. So it's taking what you've got and like translating to that, and that is like it can be tricky and it's hard. And I fully agree that you can sort of counterbalance that and match that with your demeanor and how you talk to people. And then I think like a huge part of that too is picking a few key shots and then trying to match that look. And if it doesn't work, you say like, "Hey, like this is working, but maybe like we don't push it this far." And then like to your point, you create that ebb and flow. And it's a trust thing too, like they got to be able to trust you, because like the scariest thing is working on something and then you turn around and everyone's like, "Okay, well, let's try something else." And then you're like, oh shit, now you gotta try something else. But like you just gotta be able to, yeah, and like you kind of gotta roll with it too. Like, okay, that doesn't work. Like, here, let's try this. So, I've got this, and then you try this. And then like talking it through. Like it's a relationship. It's that ebb and flow that you're talking about.
Yeah,
it is, dude. Like you said, like 50% or more of that is just reading the room, like understanding, taking like what people say, and like maybe it's not going to be like you said, like flirty. Like how do you translate flirty? Or airy or whatever, like it, and people perceive it differently too. So it is just sort of finding that balance.
When you find that balance, it's a beautiful thing too. Like it goes like once you reach that parity of that language barrier, and you learn that particular those little idioms will help so much. And it's not something you can teach either. Is the worst part about it. You have to suss it out yourself in the room on the day.
Yeah, dude, and like you're absolutely right too. Being an assistant and being in the room, like I think you have to be an assistant to some degree, man. Like there's so much you learn that you subconsciously pick up being there, or just like sitting next to someone. Like because everyone works differently, and that's the beauty of it too. Anyway,
absolutely.
I guess Mikey, could you talk about like the different kind of collaborations you have between your different forms of content? Like oftentimes if you're working with an ad agency for advertising, but then a director and DP duo for short form, and how those might differ, and then kind of like how to manage the creative vision when you're working with an agency versus the creatives, the artists per se.
That's something that like happens for most commercials, like not being on set. And like Ryan, obviously this is like a huge asset that you have, but not being on set for me is obviously not crippling, but you're kind of like you're walking into a situation where you need to figure out what the vibe is. Because I mean I've worked on stuff where the agency comes in, or like we'll get the prep or the footage, and I'm like oh man, this stuff looks beautiful, but then like agency comes in and they're like, oh, like, well, we didn't get this or this, so this is what we have, and we need to make it look like this. So you need, again, it's the same thing of trying to find, like, figuring out what they wanted to achieve. Speaking to the director and the DP beforehand is huge, in my opinion. Like, you just at least need to understand what where their head was, what they had in mind for references. And oftentimes, like, to Ryan's expertise, it's like what's done on set. The dailies that you create on set is oftentimes where, I mean, I'd say 90% of the time, it's where the director and the DP are headed in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's always a good starting point too. But then it's like taking that and then seeing what the agency have to say, and then again, it's that back and forth that you have to find a balance there.
Great.
Yeah. On that point, I'm glad you bring up the fact that like dailies end up being like where things are going. And the thing is like when you can't hit that in the dailies, like to where everyone's super happy, but then like the producer is happy or the the network is happy, that then you risk putting either yourself, if you're the final colorist in the dailies pipeline, or the guy who's going to be doing it into an awkward position, because then they've gotten used to seeing the dailies, right?
Oh, all the time.
Oh, yeah, and it's an awkward position, and it's one of those things where because the question is communication, and at what point do you get into the process, like, and Mike, you bring out that I have like an advantage here in terms of like being on the daily side of things often, but even then, I feel like given that I do so much narrative stuff, I get brought in at least half the time. Well, I'd like to say it was at least half the time before they even start shooting. That's like the very, 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 very best case scenario. A director, DP, producer, somebody has come to me and said, we're going to do this. We like your work. We want to end up coloring with you. Do you want to start talking about looks? Absolutely, I want to start talking about looks right now. I want to start watching these movies that you're doing, watching these shows, looking at these ads, looking at these paintings to get an idea like what you're thinking of for the feel of the movie. Because if we know that going in, we can start that dialogue and just like understand the dailies aren't going to be 100%. They might be 70%, but we can establish a real, honest to God plan going in. And that, my God, it's so very helpful for everybody.
Oh yeah, dude. No, it makes a huge difference. I think that's a night and day sort of transformation you could have. Yeah. Anyway.
Absolutely.
So kind of building off of that, you're talking about the ideal process, Ryan. Well, first, could you kind of describe the dailies process? Because I know there are a lot of students that are curious about that, and that's not something that's often happening at a student level, but
yeah,
as being a good pipeline into the color world would be good for people to understand. And then maybe Mikey, talk about the ideal, like, start to finish from a project, whether it's coming in with a bid for a commercial or something, because I know frequently it can end up just being, hey, the edit's done, we're moving to color, can you do this? And that's not exactly the ideal scenario. So what is the ideal scenario?
I think both of those things are super important for students to learn, because I mean, commercial bids in general and in the dailies process are things that are like those practical, real life working in video that nobody really teaches you until you're right in the middle of it, right? Dailies, if anybody, this is for a society of cinematographers, so I'm assuming that most people know what the dailies process is, but for anyone who's not familiar, dailies is basically a colorist / technician is working either on set or near set. They ingest all of the footage that gets shot through the day on a production. They sync the audio, they input the metadata, they do a basic one light color correction, which just means there's not a node structure, usually, like there is in Resolve, or a layer structure like in Baselight. Oftentimes with either a CDL that's generated by the DIT on set, and probably also a output show LUT just for a quick color space transformation. Usually, if it's an Alexa, it's as simple as like your classic K1S1 type LUT, but sometimes it is something that has been crafted by the DP working with a colorist, maybe the dailies technician on set that day, maybe not. More oftentimes not. My role right now in our dailies pipeline is to be the dailies color supervisor, and I often work with DPs ahead of time before the show actually starts during their camera test. We bring in their camera test footage, we sit down with the DP, and we're like, let's make the show LUT. Let's make this look good for all these different scenarios. And those are the LUTs that we use as the output transformation, and then we do some basic color correction in there. It's not as much of a creative step as it is a technical step. but it's a very, very, very good throw you in the fire, make you learn all the aspects of image pipeline all the way down. Because by the end of every day, you have to ingest 2 different drops of footage. Often they're over a terabyte in size, and anywhere between 2 hours of content and 8 hours of content. You have to render all that out after syncing and inputting the metadata. Render it out as Avid DNX36 files, iPad files, DVD files that you need to author to DVD, web files, oftentimes stills for the DP that you send. You need to organize the Avid bins for editorial, verify the metadata in Avid, and then send all of that stuff, all that Avid media to editorial via the internet so that they can download it at 8 a.m. the next morning at LA time. And if you don't do it, people scream at you. Because it has to work. It just has to go every day. That editorial team needs that footage for the next day, or else they are off schedule. And if they're off schedule, they don't meet their air dates. So
dude, that sounds hectic.
Oh yeah, but it's hectic, and it's a little bit grueling because the schedule means that you have to go with production, and very often network production has a mandatory 12-hour day, and they often go over by at least 2 hours. You don't get started on your last drop of footage until they wrap. They take everyone home from Transpo, and Transpo brings you the last drop of footage. Then you can start ingesting 1 to 4 terabytes of media.
Good Lord.
At midnight.
Yeah.
That's anxiety right there. Dude, Ryan, you gotta admit too, there's something really exciting about that too. That pressure and crunch, dude. It's weird. I love a little bit of pressure. Sorry.
It tempers. No, I completely agree. It tempers you, and it gets you ready for the existential pressure of doing final color in a way, in a different way. Like it's a different kind of stress, because it's more a stress on your body and your willpower.
Yeah. Oh, dude, for sure.
But there is it is similar in terms of there is a stress, especially with feature films, right? That you are the last line of defense against mediocrity. I have no other way to say it. No, we all want to think that we're creating content that people are saying man, that's cool, right? Rather than,
dude,
yeah,
fully.
Good.
Oh, dude, fully. No, and I think, dude, you hit the nail on the head again. You don't realize how much color is weighing on something until you're in those final hours. Truly, if you've got stuff that's gone to VFX or whatever, and once you get it back raw, and you probably had a LUT or something on it, but once you need to start crafting it finally, you start realizing holy shit, this is now this is a film, now this is a commercial, now this is we are the last line of defense, man. So there's a lot at stake a lot of the time too.
Oh yeah.
Because dude, you know how it is, man. You get in your head, or you get there is a bit of competitiveness, and there is an ego that comes with it, and you want to be you want to push yourself, you want to push other people too, you know. I think that's why it's really exciting to be a colorist right now, because there is so much really amazing content coming out, and a lot of that. But again, I'm probably veering off topic here, but this goes back to DPs. There's so many really talented people right now in every step of the way that are just creating really cool shit, and it's fun to be a part of it. I don't think that answered any question, but that was my 2 cents.
No, it's super fun to be a part of it, and it's also going back to the dailies discussion. There is, and I don't want to present dailies as this terrible thing that you have to go through, and it's going to kind of like ruin your sleep schedule for several years. That's going to happen. But
yeah.
but what can happen also is you get weird opportunities too. Like 2 years ago, about 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to go out of state to Massachusetts and work with Shelley Johnson, who shot Captain America and Hidalgo, the Wolfman, and what he wanted was his dailies colorist to do on every single shot what effectively was a final grade.
Wow.
And by God, we did it. and every single day, and at RAP, every single day, Shelley was in the bay with me, coloring every shot, and it was intense and cool at the same.
That's
like,
dope, dude.
Yeah,
that's wicked, man.
Mike, would you be willing to kind of walk us through what your project looks like from start to finish, more in the advertising world or short form?
Yeah, I mean, editorial is such a huge part of that. So, I mean, it's a pretty traditional telecine pipeline where it's like dailies go to editorial cuts with dailies, and then we get all the raw footage, and then we prep that. The beauty of it now is, you know, we're working to a proper conforms timeline. So you're working to the mass, like what effectively the final piece is going to be. Whereas, like, again, back in the day when you were grading film reels, you didn't know what the hell was next in the cut, so things were all over the place. Mm-hmm. It depends on the scope of the job. If it's VFX heavy, sometimes we'll do a look set, which, Ryan, again, it's like, you know, you create a LUT for what we do. The pipeline at Blacksmith has actually been really refined. If it is VFX heavy, I'll build a LUT. The 2D guys or the 3D guys will use my LUT. I'll tweak it if need be for them, and the clients will come in for that initial grade set just so we can get them just so they can get comfortable with seeing, you know, our postings. And then, like, the work is being done. Oftentimes I'll get shots from the 2D guys just to say, hey, like, I'm pushing something this way. I want to see if it breaks. Maybe my highlights are too clipped here, or like I pushed the shadows too low. Like, I want to see how it reacts. So I think that back and forth is really helpful too for us, and I really love that. But then, like, once all the VFX is done, I'll get all those shots individually, normally with 10 frame handles, just so in case anything needs to be slipped in the back end, they have the shot already graded. And then, yeah, I'll get everything back, conforms, bash it out, and then the 2D guys handle the rest. I mean, again, like, to our initial point, like, keeping it simple is such an integral part of pipeline. Like, if you have a really complicated pipeline, and you do, like, working on film, a film pipeline can get really messy because you have different people or different studios working on shots, and then, like, trying to gather a whole conform isn't easy at that point. So it's the simpler you can keep it, the better, of course.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to move towards some kind of career questions, and I guess we already talked about how both of you became colorists, but how would you, I guess, approach getting your foot in the door with post houses? Because I know that's very important from what you guys are kind of talking about and my experience as well.
Mike, I'll take that. That's the last one, yeah.
Oh, sure. No, I mean, I think Ryan touched on it really great earlier. I think you have, personally, like, I've been in this, like, almost 11 years now, I think, but 10 years, but I think being an assistant was the best thing that could have happened to me. I'm like, your life gets turned upside down almost instantly too. Like, there is a bit of sacrifice I think you have to make if you want to ultimately, you know, it sucks to say, but you kind of have to, you gotta eat a little shit for a while too. Like, being an assistant early on, dude, like, me and Luke would be pulling, like, because just the two of us, and I'd be working till 4 a.m. like consecutively, and back at the office at 8 a.m. the next day. And you just like, but again, like there was a rush, and I was like super young, and I just like, I didn't care. So there was something really gratifying about being a part of the final product. So getting those shots out in the last, like, at 2-3 a.m. so we could post for a 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. meeting, and then it's done, and then you see it on air, or you see it on the internet, and it's like, it's a huge thing. So I just think there's so much that you learn being an assistant, and it really prepares you for being a colorist. And like, again, to Ryan's point, like, you get opportunities, because sometimes, like, you're gonna have something that, like, maybe maybe the colorists are too busy, and then, like, there's this other project or a music video or a short film that you get to work on, and you just, like, I think, like, working on that stuff early on just helped me so much to ultimately become, like, and, like, I still collaborate with those people that I worked with, like, 6 or 7 years ago. And, like, if you develop those early relationships, like Sam, I know you have, like, you work with those cool guys all the time, like, that's only going to keep happening. Like, those guys are going to keep working with you, like, until forever. And, like, there's a friendship, and then there's a camaraderie that comes with that too. So I think being an assistant just puts you in the driver's seat, so to speak. And a lot of the times, like, so much is weighing on you as an assistant. Like, the colorist, like, will do most of it, but I remember, like, the renders, the postings, like, you handle all that. And you're the one who communicates with the 2D teams and the 3D teams the most. So what you learn from being an assistant is so much more than just being a creative colorist or just being a colorist in general. You learn the language of the office. You learn the language of the pipeline, of workflow. Like, you really become engulfed in that. And then, like, all the artists are going to you, because oftentimes the colorist is in a suite or in a session. So you got to know everything about the job, and you need to be able to, like, speak for the colorist and make sure you don't say the wrong thing that'll ultimately piss them off in the end. So it's, I think it's invaluable. And I think it's a huge, like, I think it is a little tricky to kind of, like, get your foot in the door, but, like, being a runner, or, sometimes it's just like, you got to start somewhere. But I think starting somewhere and getting your name out there or your face out there puts you in a way better position down the line.
Absolutely.
I want to echo what Mikey said, in terms of, like, for a while there, it's gonna really suck. In some way or another, your life is going to be completely upended, and you're going to be put in situations too that are awkward and weird. And, like, for example, if you're an intern at a post house, there might be some times when, like, most of the time a colorist is going to, like, be happy to have you in the room with them and coloring. And then there are going to be days where your colorist says, like, man, I just got to be alone for a little bit. Like, I gotta laser focus on this. And you gotta know, just in terms of, like, you need to know when to read the room, when a client is in the room sitting with you, you need to learn how to read your supervisor. How to, like, get that ebb and flow down to prep you for getting the ebb and flow of your future clients down. Like, if they're having, like, a rough morning, like, I'm not saying go and get coffee for your dude. Look, that's your supervisor. I'm just saying, like, be like, hey man, you need some alone time. I totally understand. Like, I'll fuck off and like, do something else. Like, and most of the time they're gonna be appreciative of that stuff. But more than that, the hours are going to be rough for you, and they're gonna be some of the most rewarding times when you look back on it and you think, man, I'm really glad I went through that. I'm really glad that I was able to perform at my peak when people needed me the most to do the thing that nobody wanted to do. Whew, boy, talk about impressing people. Like,
oh, no doubt. Yeah. Because it's that once people start relying on you for stuff like that, they're gaining the trust of, like, a studio is, like, invaluable, and it'll help you forever. You'll, like, to have that skill and to have that sort of work ethic, I think is huge.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say, because I like the way that you put it, Sam, of specifically, how do you get your foot in the door? And often I feel like get your foot in the door means two things, right? It's what we're talking about right now, which is, how do you impress the people once you're there? And then it's also, how the hell do you talk to these post houses? Like, if you've never been in a post house, who's Joe Schmo who just graduated from DePaul or Columbia, right? Who's like, right, exactly. I mean, I'll tell you what I did to get into post houses, and it maybe is not the best way, but it sure shit worked for me. Which was the day after I graduated from Columbia, I emailed every single post house in Chicago, with my reel, with my website, with my CV, and I crafted a specific email for that specific post house, naming specific spots or films they had done. Mm-hmm. That day, I got 3 callbacks. Not saying, all 3 of them said, we don't really have anything right now, but we wanted to thank you for emailing in and expressing your interest. Now, I maybe sent out like 20, 25 emails, and I got 3 callbacks. And then a month later, I was an assistant. Now, that's not going to be the case for everybody. But you got to shoot your shot, is what I would say. You got to, like, at a certain point, when you've built up your body of work, which, by the way, Mikey, you touched on, I cannot like agree more wholeheartedly with that. You need to like get a camaraderie with certain other artists. You need to, a lot of times, you need to just make shit. You need to just work on films, work on people's like proof of concept ads, proof of concept films, and so much of the time you're not going to be making any money on it starting out. I'll tell you what, I've been in this business for 10 years and I still do shorts, features, and ads like pro bono because I want to work with that person and they don't have a budget. It's their passion project and they want to do it, and I want to do it with them because they're cool and they're going to be making cool work later down the line. So you've got to do a lot of that stuff to build up your professional reel that you can then send out everywhere. Like, I have my current job right now because I messaged my current boss on LinkedIn.
Hell yeah.
Like, people like it when you talk to them. People know you exist. More to the point, if you reach out to people and you talk to them, they know you exist. That's your foot in the door right now, is making sure they know you exist.
I definitely will say, like, you could send your resume and your reel and all that to the talent manager, recruiter, which, you know, not every post house might have, but it's definitely good to kind of get that FaceTime with people and make sure that they know who you are. Like, that's kind of how I met Mikey, was just kind of met him through Instagram and kind of helped me get my foot in the door with the mill. And it also happened with another colorist, like just grabbed coffee with them, and then down the line, like, was brought in to speak with their company.
It's super hard right now too with the pandemic going on, because another thing I would normally advise you is, like, go out there and shake some hands and drink some drinks with people. Mm-hmm. Like, people want to, in this, especially in this industry, people want to know that you can have a beer or a cocktail with them and stay cool.
Oh yeah. No, gone. Sorry.
Oh, I'm good. That's all I'll say about that.
No, dude. I think that's that's a huge part of it. I imagine, like, how many jobs or whatever have you done over a drink, or how many times have you, like, gotten drunk and, like, shot the shit, and then, like, you met someone and then you're working with them the next moment. Dude, it happens. It's anyway.
So many.
Probably what's not meant to be shared, but
but it's the business, man. Like,
dude, you got to play the game.
The number of jobs that I've gotten by going to things like the Midwest Independent Film Festival, or AICP parties, or rap parties for network stuff, right? If you end up getting invited to a rap party, holy crap, go talk to camera. Go find the camera department. Talk to the gaffers. All the gaffers, all those guys want to be DPs. Eventually, at least half of them will be.
Yeah, big time.
Talk to DPs.
Yeah. And so some other question kind of tying into this was people are wondering about what differences you might see being like a colorist at a post house versus being a freelancer, which might be a little tough to answer, but I'm sure you guys know plenty of people doing that.
Yeah, I think that's like the toughest question, honestly.
What's the question again, Sam? What's the difference between working in a studio and being a freelancer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
I would say, yeah. So I've done both. While I was doing dailies, I was also doing freelance, and I do freelance myself, like on the side, just for like people that I want to eventually bring into the post house, right? Let's start with the post house. What are the benefits of working in a post house? You get to know that you don't necessarily need to push quite as hard on the sales aspect of things, and you can refocus yourself on refining your quote-unquote art, right? And part of your art is both being an image technician, the final looks artist, and a de facto engineer, but also salesman in the room versus salesman on the floor out in the world, right? Which you also need to do, but there's not quite so much pressure. Being a freelancer, a large portion of your time, your free time, I would say, needs to be thinking about ways that you can get the next thing and how long the next thing is going to be and how long that's going to sustain you. You have to think like an entrepreneur, like a businessman versus just a technician. And if you're not thinking where you're going to be in 3 months, you're going to be hungry in 3 months. That's but at the same time, you get to decide what projects you do and do not work on, which most often than not, if you're working at like a cool post house, you don't necessarily need to worry about that all that much, but you can determine your own personal direction and decide, like, I definitely want to work with this person, this person, this person. And that's nice, but with that comes a price. You have to be vigilant if you're a freelancer.
Yeah. I would also argue that there's a different peak that you can reach to a certain extent being a freelancer. There are definitely exceptions to that rule, but like freelancers grading Marvel movies, those kind of things, you have to be like certified by Netflix and all those sort of things that you really are only going to be able to get through a post house or a studio.
Yes, and let's talk about costs too, like upfront cost. Like if you say you want to like start working in Dolby Vision, okay, I hope that you're ready to drop down 50 grand and 12 grand every year. I hope you have, like, if you have the funds to do that, you go. But what you're going to be doing at that point is you're starting your own post house. So you're not really a freelancer anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, dude, for me, I can't really, I've never been freelance, but I mean, having the kit in a studio is probably the biggest one for me. Having a proper monitor, like a full panel, whether it be Resolve or Basslight, having the space to bring people come to. And I think to your point, Ryan, like if you work in a post house or if you work in a studio or whichever, like there isn't much of a sell, like it sells itself kind of already. Like, and then you come in and like every post house looks great. Like I couldn't tell you a bad post house I've ever been in. They all look different. They're all nice. Like there's always something really like sexy and attractive about them. So like, yeah, it's cool to bring people in, especially when you're first starting out. Like, dude, there's no better feeling than bringing someone to a suite to have a session.
Yeah.
And you throw on some tunes, maybe like you have some beers or whatever, and like you chill. And then that's like, again, like that's how your relationships start to happen. So yeah, no, I think it's a huge benefit. It's a huge asset.
Yeah. Sam, you're you're doing freelance color right now, right?
Yeah.
yeah. So like, what's your perspective on it as a freelancer right now?
Definitely an interesting time to be doing freelance. Not exactly what I was hoping, but I definitely see all the value in a post house, and that's what I'm looking towards long term. But I'm appreciating like the flexibility that freelance is giving me at the moment. And for me, part of it was like trying to balance growing freelance while also working full time was a bit of a challenge, but yeah, definitely like the business side and selling yourself and like trying to find time to work on your own portfolio, like updating your website or your reel or like filing all your taxes and all that kind of stuff. Like those are time that you can't spend actually doing the thing that's making you money. So it definitely requires a lot of planning and a good business knowledge, as you're talking about.
I fully agree with both what both of you guys are saying. And Sam, you mentioned taxes. That's another thing about being a freelancer is that they don't really teach you in school is if you're going to be freelance, be ready for estimated quarterly taxes. It's a hell of a thing.
Oh, and I think something that I really want to add on is that like we've talked about communication a lot, and communication for the purpose of creativity. But as a freelancer, you also have to be the one communicating for business. And so you have to be kind of negotiating and trying to be the nice guy, but also still getting your rate and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing to balance where you bring people in the room and you want them not to like have a bad taste in their mouth before they even get there. So it's nice to kind of have somebody, a producer that'll kind of do all the business side of things for you.
It helps to have that buffer. Mm-hmm. Trust me.
Hell yeah.
Between the person who's saying, we're gonna charge you X thousands of dollars for this job, and the guy who's like, all right, let's do this. It's so much fun. Like,
yeah. Well, it's good cop, bad cop too, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And so you guys were talking earlier about kind of the grueling aspects of starting out, and I thought it was important to kind of touch on work-life balance in post. What the average day might look like.
It doesn't exist. I mean, I think it's relative to your situation, of course. I mean, Ryan's day is pretty different to mine, so I mean, dude, Ryan was talking about like starting work at midnight. So, and then like, I don't know, Ryan, how often are you doing that then? Like, if you do, what is it like? How long is a show for that you'll be doing like starting at midnight?
A show can last as long as like 6 months on a given network show. Now, thankfully, I'm not usually the guy anymore who is pulling that shift. I did that for a long time, and now we have technicians who are doing that who are at the level that I was when I was doing that, right? But there are times still where like technician is sick, and you got to pull it for a couple of weeks, right? And then your whole work-life balance gets thrown for another loop. If you are in doing it, it's that way for a very long time. I was doing that straight for 3 years when I was doing that, and it to this day, I live on about a 30-hour cycle. That was several years ago. And I'm now still, by Friday, I want to go to sleep at like 4 a.m. because my schedule, it like progresses by like about an hour every day. And I'm still recovering from it. So in terms of work-life balance, just understand what you're getting into when you get into cinema and advertising.
Not in the production world either.
I mean, the thing is though, like, it doesn't all have to be bad. It just so often is. And a lot of it depends on your mindset on it too, and about like like, do what you have to do to make it work for you. Like for me, in the last, like, in recent history, it's been like adapting like Eastern philosophy, right? Like the whole idea of like, do your work, do it well, and then release it. Like when you're not in there, try your best to just take a breath and have the you time where you do hobbies. That, I think, is going to be one of the things that you're going to find is going to be hard to maintain and essential to maintain. You have to do things that are not this, or else it will eat you alive and rot from the core spreads outward, and you get to burnout mode. Burnout is what you're fighting against the most in this. At any stage in the career, I don't care if you're an intern, an assistant, a final colorist, if you're running a post house, you're going to get to the point to where it's just like you don't want to do anything anymore, and nothing like fulfills you. And the reason for that is you've made your entire life work. Have things, even if the things are still watching movies, right? Have hobbies that are not associated with doing the damn thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like, that was hard for me early on too, because you want to make a good impression too, you know, like you want to be the guy that's always there and always like raising his hand, but there's a price that you have to pay, to your point, Ryan. And what the tricky part is too, is once you're burned out, it's hard to not be burnt out anymore. So, and then like you're used to it. And then all of a sudden it's like, you know, like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. is your regular, and that's not healthy. And like you need to be working at optimal sort of conditions, you know, like you need to take care of yourself, because I sure as hell didn't take care of myself for a long time. And yeah, I think the biggest part is having a hobby, or having something that you can just disconnect from entirely, where you can just like not have to worry about it. You don't really have to think about it. It doesn't mean you don't love it. It doesn't mean that you're not like, you don't enjoy what you do. But I think you're that much more effective if your mind is elsewhere for a certain amount of time. And it is like, it's a discipline. You need to occupy your mind somewhere else for whatever. If it's a day, a weekend, a couple hours, like if you can train yourself to do that, like you're only going to be a more effective sort of, and creative person too. You know, like no one works well when they're burnt out. Nothing's right. Like it all takes a hit. And you don't realize it until you've been burnt out, which is the problem. Yeah. You don't appreciate things until you've like been in this shit for a while, or appreciate the time you have alone. Like, and then like there's often times like where if we're slow for a week, and this is when we were going into the office, if there's like some downtime, yeah, like you're kind of like you get in your head a little bit too. So you're like, oh shit, like when's it, like what's the next week gonna be like? And then the next week comes and you're slammed every day. And then you're like, well, I could have done this last week. So it's like, you know, seize the opportunity to, you know, do things.
Absolutely. I love that you love what you said about like, it'll help you ultimately in creativity. That's,
big time.
You get to a point where like, you kind of forget that we all came into this because it's our first love, right? And it working that kind of schedule transforms it in a really weird, sort of twisted way, to where you're like, if you look at an image from like, you know, like Sven Nykvist, eventually you'll work yourself to the bone so much where you're like, yeah, it's really pretty and it's got a lot of grain on it. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? You've got to get to that point to where you're like, you see something from Ingmar Bergman or like a Bergman Nykvist movie, and you're like, fuck, yes, absolutely. Like, this is why I'm here, is to be one of these guys. So you gotta rediscover that love by disconnecting yourself from it sometimes.
Yeah.
What's your hobby, Ryan and Sam?
D&D.
Oh no shit.
Yeah, but
that's awesome.
I'm definitely film photography and biking at the time. I'm kind of picking the cello back up after letting it down for a long time.
That's wicked, dude.
Nice.
Yeah.
But no, like think of like, okay, so both of those things drastically different from the day to day. So like invaluable time spent like doing that, and you have fun too. Like
Absolutely.
it's got to be enjoyed.
Absolutely.
And speaking towards like the creative thing, I think for me, some of the biggest creative advances in projects have been when I've like let the project go at, you know, whatever hour of the night, and then woken up in the morning, looked at it, and been like, yeah, no, we went the wrong direction, and just
Fresh
kind of.
eyes, man. Fresh
So,
eyes.
totally agree with all that. At this point, it's already been an hour and 15 minutes or so. I don't know if you guys still have time for a few more questions, or if you want to wrap things
Yeah,
up.
go for it, dude.
I'm great, man.
Cool. Appreciate it. And so, people want to kind of ask about the artistry style of things. Like, do you guys feel you have a particular style, or are you trying to be kind of without any style? That way, you're a painter for whoever you're working with.
Yeah, I mean,
You go, Mikey.
sorry. I think it's a kind of a tricky one to answer, but I also think that I like I like natural things. I like but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a natural colorist. Like I think you need to. We talked about this early on about being able to adapt. Like you don't. I think one of the more crippling aspects of being a colorist is being pigeonholed into your style, like your look, and like that's cool and that's great. But I think the real artistry and the craft is being able to do it all. And it's not saying that you're going to be like it's not a jack of all trades, master of none sort of mentality, but it's like it's adaptability, being able to know and understand and replicate that through your work. Because there's like people I want to work with everyone. Like, you know, I'm down to work with anyone too, and I want to do weird and crazy shit, that things that I wouldn't do. I want to be challenged and I want to be pushed by other people, because that's only what makes me more creative. It's only what's going to make like my body of work more creative. And like oftentimes I'm going to think differently than someone else. So like it's that like back and forth and that collaboration that you have with people that is really the more inspiring parts to being a colorist. I think having a style comes with just working with people and just like gathering everything you can from DPs, directors, creatives. Like there's, like Ryan mentioned earlier on, there's so much to be learned and so much to be taken from people that you learn. The true beauty of being a colorist is that you're never going to know everything. And like things are going to change, technologies advance, whatever. Like to be mobile and to be able to adapt to that is really something incredible.
Could not possibly agree more with everything you said. Like just even starting off baseline, like if I have a style, and I definitely like internally have a style, it is toward organic and natural looks. I prefer images from like that you would see on like say the Criterion Channel. I love the celluloid. I love negative film. I love the work of Sven Nykvist and Dean Kundi, and especially and the guys now who are doing like especially like the 65 millimeter and 35 millimeter stuff still, like Darius Khondji, right? Like Uncut Gems is like my favorite movie, one of my favorite movies of last year, because of how it looks. Same with Marriage Story, same with Little Women. Like all those have that like texturized organic feel to them. And if I have my druthers on almost any project, of course I'm going to be like, so we're thinking about like 500T for this, right?
Yeah.
that's what I like to look at. I like to look at 500T Super 16.
Oh, dude. Yeah. No. Sorry.
Right?
Go on.
It's so fucking sexy.
No, it's the best. There's no better format for creating for film. Like,
absolutely.
Go on.
It's unparalleled. Like there's something timeless about film and emulsion. Like I can go on and on and on. But the thing is, what you were saying is also true. You end up getting pigeonholed not just by your clients that are coming to you saying like, okay, I want you to do exactly the thing you did on your last 3 films for me. You end up getting pigeonholed within yourself.
Totally.
Like eventually you get to the point to where like, okay, I'm going to use this film emulation LUT that I know was created by these color scientists because I know it's great and it's going to get me to where I want to be. And I'm going to use this film grain because I know that it emulates this particular film stock perfectly. And I looked at the scopes and everything's great. And then you go. And that's the thing you do every single time. And when you get to the point where you're doing that exact thing every single time and you're recreating that particular look for every movie, then you need to step back to yourself and say, am I showing what I can really do with every like direction? And you are showing that you're able to make any image look like that one look. And if you really, 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 really like that look and people come to you for that look and you're happy with that, hey, cool. But you're also not expanding the bounds of what you can do. And to that end, I think that that love of like slightly lifted blacks, slightly rolled off highlights with midtones that like just sort of fold into the middle, you know, that old film emulation look. Loving that so much has kind of kept me from embracing things like Dolby Vision and HDR10, because anytime I see Dolby Vision and HDR10, frankly, I think it looks awful, because it's so bright, and so it just does not look like flickery film to me. But that's the wrong way to approach it. Absolutely, the 100% wrong way, because it puts me into that class of artist that I always try to not be. That guy who says like, I know EDLs, I don't want to like experiment with it with AAFs and like,
yeah,
I don't want to be that guy. I want to know all the things. You have to, in the same way that you were saying, like you have to be adaptable, and you have to be not necessarily a jack of all trades, master of none. You have to be able to recreate whatever your client wants. And in that sense, you need to not stop learning how to do those things.
It is tricky though, because I think you're absolutely right, and there are things that I love, but like you don't get to do that every time. And I think in like having to break past the like, I remember like early on, I was just like, all right, I'm going to try, and every client session, I'm going to have this look set up and I'm going to try and push them on that. Like I'm going to sell them on this, like, and it's the same look you're talking about. That's like, you got these rolled off shadows, you got roll off highlights, and you're like, I'm going to fucking sell this shit no matter what. And then it's like, nah, like we don't want this. But then like you create something else and you're like, actually, this looks really nice. And then like, dude, like, again, it's just like, it is like being fixed on something that you get so caught up in, and I still get caught up in it today. But it's like once you break past it, you're like, all right, like you gotta. But it's like we've said this entire talk. Like you gotta push it and break it and do your own thing, and then you gotta start from scratch, and then you evolve with that. You gotta roll with it.
100% agree.
All right. And I know we touched on a little bit already, but where do you each seek inspiration?
I watch so damn many movies, and TV shows. And another thing I do is I try my hardest to bring in references and look at them on my calibrated monitor. I think that is, if you watched a thing on your consumer TV and you're like, oh my God, yeah, that's it. I want to try to like do that. That's all well and good. You got to look at what it actually looks like on the calibrated monitor. And to do that, if it's on Blu-ray, I have one tip that was given to me a few years ago by a colorist friend. There's a website called blue-ray.com, just, blue without the E. blue-ray.com. If you log into that website, like make an account on their forums, you can download. They review every single Blu-ray that gets released, and they pull from the stream data stills that are watermarked. They have a little Blu-ray.com watermark on them. Excuse me. They have a little Blu-ray.com watermark on them, but it's from the Blu-ray data at 1080p or at 4K HDR if they have it available. And you can put it up on your monitor, and you can look at what the Rec 709 looks like, and you can target for that if you really want to. If someone says to you, like, I want this to look like Good Time meets Under the Skin. Great. I'm going to go on Blu-ray.com, and I'm going to pull down 20 stills from Under the Skin and 20 stills from Good Time. And we're going to go. We're going to look at and, like, study what these things look like.
Just to add on real quick, I've been plugging it everywhere. But I and
Great.
others, you should check out Shot Deck. It's a great site that I think some big ACDP made, but it's all Blu-ray stills. And I think for now it's free, but might not be forever. And they all have like metadata tags for color, shot size, format, and you can search like pretty much anything. You could search like overhead sync, and there would be results.
Oh, man. Great.
And
Have you searched overhead sync?
no, they've just been posting examples on their Instagram.
Bullshit. Of course you have.
So that has been a really, really good resource for me the last few months. And also giving that to other kind of directors makes their life really easy for searching for stills and different kind of color schemes that they're liking. Really, really nice tool.
Absolutely. That's great. I just added it to my phone. So
Check it out. Mikey, how about you?
Inspiration? I've been going back to photography lately. Alex Soth is my favorite photographer, so I'm kind of obsessed. I love like 4x5 or 8x10 photographers, you know, like Abaddon style shit. Like, but like films.
Yeah.
I rewatch things so many times stupidly. I also like really garbage films too. For some reason, that's like a huge inspiration for me.
absolutely. Oh, man.
Like bad 90s films, bad 80s films. Like I'm obsessed with that shit. I haven't gotten into series that much lately. And I think part of it is just I'm prone to just sitting down and watching stuff and just wasting my time, like burning a day just watching series. So I try to limit my time with that. But 80s and 90s films, huge. I think contemporary DPs and like just I try to stay in the loop with all that stuff and see like who's working on what, commercials, whatever. Like there's just so much content out there right now. I think it's all inspiring.
Yeah.
And I just think it's like there's something to be learned from all of it too, or there's a takeaway from all of it.
Mm-hmm. And especially as you guys are talking about celluloid and film being kind of the ideal format so frequently, shooting it yourself will also give you a good idea of how it can react to different light and exposure. So I definitely will agree with that being a nice.
You have to know how a camera works, like the mechanical components and like the science of light, like how I think that's essential in being a colorist. Mm-hmm. As like pretentious as that sounds, I think you don't realize how much it means to your craft, to your work.
You know, we both of us have been champions of the whole like work smarter, not harder thing in this conversation. And I think that sometimes that can be misconstrued for you're not going to have to work hard at some point. I think that the thing about working smarter and not harder is that the hard work happens up front. You put in the hours ahead of time so that you won't have to recreate the wheel every single time.
Exactly.
And to that end, research, like knowing your craft from the ground level up, like knowing how lensing works, what the different kind of sky panels out there are, like being able to talk about lights with a gaffer and a DP in an intellectual way, like Kelvin temperatures, right? Like it's so very basic, but there's so many colorists out there who were just starting out, and I'm like, well, they shot this at 56K, but I think he's like really thinking of something more like 23K. They don't really like have that language because they didn't take cinematography classes or photography classes, right? Like you just start off with your resolve nodes and you go, contrast, saturation, go, and it's not so much in terms of Kelvin ratings, and you got to know that stuff. And to tie that back all in with inspiration, and to list a specific source of inspiration that is also research for me. One of my favorite current working DPs right now is Steve Yedlin. And Steve Yedlin, I'm sure you guys know, he's Rian Johnson's DP. He shot The Last Jedi. He shot Knives Out. And he also is a high level color scientist kind of guy. Like he thinks in those terms of the science of light and the science of lensing and all that stuff. And he has several hours of content on his website where he breaks down his process of film emulation and what film emulation means to him in a digital landscape, and how he's doing things like shooting a chart on an Alexa, shooting a chart on 5217 or like 500T film, and then doing the mathematical translations in Nuke, of all things, to get to his film emulation LUT. And that's high-level nerdery that you don't necessarily need to ascend to, but learn what these dudes are doing to get to that level of mastery so that you can emulate it to your own workflow so you don't have to work so hard down the line.
Yeah. I know there's kind of
that dude's wild, man. Content.
He is.
I know there's kind of been a push lately too in kind of color tool development to kind of be making those tools like Base Grade for Baselight, has tools that are actually working with the same ideas from the camera, like straight exposure that works exactly the way that it would come through a lens. If everything's set up properly, and other people are kind of trying to create tools that adjust white balance in a photoreal way. So that's kind of hopefully going to be making our lives a little bit easier in terms of communication and also just understanding of how those things are working.
There's so many good tools out there, man. Don't be. I would also say don't be afraid of using plugins if you need it. If you need to, test them out. Do the free trials and shit, because a lot of people are not big proponents on going out there and finding creative LUTs, quote unquote, that people make, and because then it gets to the point of well, how much work are you really doing if you're just slapping a LUT on there? Well, it's not about slapping a LUT on there. It's about seeing what other people are doing, what is available on the market. If you like this Jurassic Park LUT that you found, but you found that it only works if you tool it to 50% opacity, and then do all these other things on the back end, and then on the output of that, you're tweaking it a little bit more. Congratulations, you're not slapping a LUT on it. You're using it as a tool to get you to perfection.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's pretty much everything we were hoping to touch on. So I just wanted to kind of close out on 2 questions. What would you have done differently looking back, and what advice would you give to someone who wants to be a colorist or just filmmaker in general, kind of starting out in their careers?
I would have colored even more things for free when I was in as a student. I would have put my face while they were all there in the classroom. I would have put my face in front of DPs and just been like, hey man, what are you working on right now? You got something that you shot a year ago? You want colored? I'll do it for free. I was having my room and board and food paid for. What was I worried about in terms of sustaining myself? On the front end, I would have, as I said, do work on the front end so you don't have to do so much work on the back end. I would have done even more than I did. And I did a fair bit. Like, I was like coloring as much as I could, but I didn't start soon enough doing that. I started that in my very like last year at Columbia. I would have like, as soon as I decided I was going to want to be a colorist, I should have been like, I'll color everything as much as I can, right when I could get away with it,
without burning yourself out.
Sure. I mean, when you're 19, that level of exhaustion.
Yeah, you can afford it when you're that young.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's tricky because I don't know if I don't know how much I would want to change at this point. You know, like I think it is sort of trial by fire in a lot of ways, and I think I needed to know. It was a question of commitment too, and like how badly I wanted it. And I just think at the end of the day, like I'm proud of myself, and like I don't know how often I can say I'm proud of myself for certain things, but like this is one thing I could certainly like sort of look back on and like see my progression. Because that's one thing too. Like I can go back and look at the first thing I ever did and cringe and hate it, but like I can also look at what I've done, you know, in the last year, and like being a colorist, and like you have tangible proof of how much you've evolved, what you've learned. You know, it is sort of I think it represents a lot of like your I don't even know how to say this. It represents a lot of like what you've been through, you know, because I can look back and I can remember certain things like when I was working on them. Like you associate them with, I associate spots I was working on with like memories, and like I don't know, it's kind of a weird thing, but I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned a lot like professionally. Like we work in a field that we really love, and I think that's at the end of the day, like that's something that we have to remember. And like we've gotten here, and like there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. So I can't really I can't look back and regret much, to be honest with you.
I love that perspective, man. And I love the idea of like you looking back and maybe not loving some of the things you did when you started off. And same here. And to build on that, like one of the reasons why I say I would have done even more stuff is I wish I'd failed more.
Totally.
Failing is the only way you get to mastery. Dude,
I think we like we're in school, in culture, life, whatever. I don't know how deep I want to get into it, but it's like you're taught not to like failure as being like the worst thing in the world. Like you don't accept failure, but like failure, you have to be able to fall on your face and pick yourself back up and get back into it. Because the hardest part, like not everyone's gonna love your work. Like you're gonna sit in with people and they're not gonna like what you do, and that's a hard ass reality to face, and it sucks. But like to pick yourself back up and then like rise above that and come back on top of the next one and the next one and the next one, and then like next thing you know, maybe you're working with that person again because they've seen your work again, and it's like there's little victories, man, and it's like it's a game. You got to play the game too. It's not always gonna be perfect, and that's the hard part.
Hell yeah. Absolutely.
All right. I think that pretty much wraps it up. So thank you to both of you. This has been a really great conversation, and I'm sure invaluable for people trying to understand this craft a little bit more. And if anyone wants to check your work out or reach out to you, what might be the best way?
Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram can be.
What'd you say?
What's your Instagram handle?
It's Mikey Package.
There you go.
Instagram for me too. It's going to just be CR Stemple. And then you can go to my personal website, which is cryanstemple.com, and the Periscope website, which is periscopepa.com.
All right. Great. Thank you guys so much.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah, super fun, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye.